We've talked quite a bit about book talk on this channel, specifically a lot of sexy books. There was the sexy Shrek book.
Pinocchio is telling lies and penetrating women with his wooden nose.
The sexy biker book.
Reading Haunting Adeline on their motorcycles.
The sexy incest books. All of which have been bad.
We both laugh at our son's big balls.
None of them got the Nikki seal of approval. The dead to me. But today, we're talking about a book that's quality lands in a gray area. Dare I say it? Boo! Boo! I know, nuance? Nikki, what the f? It's called A Court of Thorns and Roses, or ACOTAR for short, written by Sarah J. Maas. And it's the first in a series of 5 wildly popular fantasy books. And to just put it simply, these books have been praised up the wazoo. This first one alone has millions of 5-star reviews on Goodreads, with some people even claiming that this book was life-changing. Seriously, fans love this so much, they're willing to shave a couple of years off of the planet by making these ugly AI edits. Goodbye, Ocean. It was nice knowing ya. To put the popularity of ACOTAR in perspective, in 2024, Sarah J. Maas sold over twice the amount of books as Colleen Hoover, someone we are unfortunately all too familiar with.
We both laugh at our son's big balls.
And you know, I thought Colleen was the author with the biggest chokehold on straight women, but no, that's all Sarah, baby. But apparently, a huge factor behind this is that these books are supposedly very, very spicy. The kind that makes book talk girlies put the peppers on the screen.
This is the spiciest book I've ever read.
I read a lot of smut in 2023.
Realistically though, in my opinion, this was about as spicy as some toothpaste. No, officer, I did not jerk my peanuts to this book. But more importantly, okay, for all the praise that this series gets, there is a near equal amount of nuclear skepticism, with many people criticizing the quality of the writing.
The writing is bad.
Is the writing bad? We'll get into it. We'll get into it. That was both horrible and incredible at the same time. My thoughts are a whirlwind. I cannot remember being this conflicted over a book. There are parts of A Court of Thorns and Roses I really love, but a lot of parts I really hated. You get the idea. However, it's kind of hard for me to gauge exactly how I feel about Sarah's writing right now, just as a whole, considering the general consensus online is that A Court of Thorns and Roses is one of the worst books in the entire series, which is kind of hilarious. It makes you wonder how a second book even came to be. The situation doesn't work in any other context. Anyways, this book was recommended to me a bodacious amount of times. So this is me finally submitting to the peer pressure. So, in the spirit of fairness, I have embarked on this journey with a completely blind and open mind. But don't get me wrong, we will be roasting this book and making fun of it. However, I'll also be paying respects to the lore and the very interesting things about ACOTAR, of which there is many. So if you hate this series, this video is for you. And if you love this series, this video is also for you. And if you enjoy this video and want me to read the second book, please comment down below. Before we get into that, have you ever been in a bookstore or been book browsing online and realized I have no idea what to get? Are any of these even good? Or maybe you've thought to yourself, I want to support more up and coming authors. Well, if you love reading and you answered yes to any of those questions, Book of the Month is perfect for you. Book of the Month is a subscription service that carefully and thoughtfully curates 5 to 7 books every month for its users to choose from. And your book selection comes right to your door in this cute little box. And this is personally what I needed in this overstimulating world of abundance. Like, there's just too much information and opinions to absorb all the time. And so I'm like, yes, please narrow it down for me. And so from their selection this month, I chose A Sea of Unspoken Things Selections by Adrian Young. And let me tell you, I am so excited to read this book because the plot is absolutely fantastic. It's about a woman named James whose twin brother tragically dies in an accident, which leads her to digging deeper into his past and discovering ominous secrets. So cool, right? And if it wasn't for Book of the Month, I seriously doubt that I would have ever discovered it. And get this, they are veterans in this field, okay? Book of the Month has been platforming compelling new authors since 1926, and multiple books that they've curated ended up being literary classics. Like, that's insane. And so, if you join, which I hope you do, you can use code NEWYOU and get your first book for just $5. Listen, I love Book of the Month. I look forward to the curated selections every month, and I know you will too. So why not try it for yourself? Once again, that's code NEWYOU. Okay, now back to the video. Let's get into it. ACOTAR is about a 19-year-old girl named Farah, which is so hard for me to say, by the way. I caught myself saying Farah, but she lives in a dilapidated village that I would compare to District 12 in the Hunger Games. Like, there's poverty, famine. The townspeople are all on Minecraft survival mode, and they've only got half a heart left, you know what I mean? And so the book begins with Farah hunting a deer for her starving family. She's got a bow and arrow, also very reminiscent of the Hunger Games, and she's approaching these dark, ominous woods in the icy, cold winter. Brr, brr. Why is this 19-year-old pipsqueak alone on this perilous quest? Well, the lore runs deep with it, but in short, her family is either dead or sucks, with the only exclusion to that being her father, Mr. Archeron. And I'm not just calling him Mr. Archeron for the hell of it. Like, he actually doesn't have a first name, meaning Sarah forgot about his ass. Yeah, that's right, we're on first name basis, Sarah. But anyways, Mr. Archeron was an extremely successful business merchant, and because of that, their family used to be incredibly wealthy. Farah and her two sisters all lived in a lavish mansion up until 2 years ago. But all of this went down the shitter when Mr. Archeron made some sort of poor business investment. Apparently such a poor investment that it milked him dry of any pennies or dimes. Okay, creditors came after his ass and bashed in his leg right in front of Farah, and this was traumatic as for her. So much so that she soiled herself and threw up at the same time. And while all of this went down, her sisters Elaine and Nesta were hiding in the bathroom. Mind you, they're older than her. Just saying, keep that in mind. But yeah, unfortunately, because of this, they are both really unsympathetic to both their dad and Farah. Now, these two sisters' personalities really just boil down to Elaine equals stupid and Nesta equals smart but mean. Mathematically speaking, of course. Nesta really spends all her time being rude AF to her dad just because they're not rich anymore. Like, damn, poor guy has like a rotten leg with scurvy and his daughter hates him. Don't kick him while he's down. The creditors already did that. Of course, Nesta had taken the loss of our fortune the hardest. She had quietly resented my father from the moment we'd fled our manor, even after that awful day those creditors came. But both of these bozos were so used to living large that to this day, they barely lift a finger. And it's not just like, oh no, they're not doing dishes, no one's taking out the trash, No, them being this lazy, quite frankly lazy as a turd with flies on it, has put the burden of finding food, water, and taking care of their dad all on Farah. I must reiterate, is only 19. Meanwhile, these fools are in their early 20s. Yeah. But funnily enough, Farah is only really offended by Nesta's indifference, because she even says it herself. Elaine is just too dumb to know what is even happening. It wasn't that Elaine was cruel. She wasn't like Nesta, who had been born with a sneer on her face case, Elaine sometimes just didn't grasp things. It wasn't meanness that kept her from offering no help. It simply never occurred to her that she might be capable of getting her hands dirty. Regardless of how bad Feyre is being treated though, she continues to carry her household on her back. And this is mostly because she made a promise to her mom on her deathbed, okay? She was dying of typhus, and her mom goes, "Promise me that you'll take care of your sisters and your dad." And this detail is really so bizarre to me because this woman really made her 11-year-old, who has 2 older siblings, promise to take care of everyone? Okay. But let me reel you back in. Let's talk about the present. As Feyre is treading through the snow, she finally catches up to the deer, and she begins fantasizing about a new pair of boots that she could make with his pelt. You know you're in a bad life position when pelts come into play. But unfortunately, her older sisters also need things, so she has to think about them first. Elaine needed a new cloak, and Nesta was prone to crave anything someone else possessed. See what I was telling you about Nesta? You know, I've heard that she becomes like a fan favorite in the future. I don't see it right now. I don't like this girl. Anyways, this deer is just sitting there grazing on some grass in the perfect position for her to hit with her bow and arrow. But suddenly she freezes because she sees a wolf the size of a pony. He was enormous, the size of a pony. But worse than his size was his unnatural stealth. Even as he inched closer in the brush, he remained unheard, unspotted by the doe. No animal that massive could be so quiet. The pony measuring scale is killing me, but the strangeness and largeness of this guy causes her to suspect that this isn't a normal wolf, okay? That this is possibly a fairy. And when I say fairy, I don't mean your typical Tinkerbell, butterfly, half-human species. No, not at all. These fairies are a little more complicated to explain because there's different kinds. Most notably, there's lesser fairies, which sounds messed up, and it is. They pretty much just look like anything not human. And while they're pretty cool and immortal, their issues boil down to them not being hot and also treated like secondary citizens. But secondly, and more importantly, there's the High Fae, which are fairies that rule the nobility of Prythian, okay? Prythian is all the fairies' world. That's all their territory. Now here's where the difference comes in with the lesser fairies and the High Fae. The High Fae's default form is very humanoid looking. Like they're basically just a standard hot guy with slightly pointy ears. And so besides looking like a himbo, other benefits of being the High Fae include having magical powers, being rich AF, and get this, they can shapeshift into anything, including but not limited to a pony-sized wolf. Okay, and regardless if you are a lesser fae or the High Fae, both are considered extremely dangerous to humans because they have species on species beef, to say the least. So much beef that there's a magical wall separating the mortal lands, the human realm, from Prythian. And so, as Feyre's standing here looking at the pony-sized wolf, she's like, okay, because what makes this even more suspicious is that her village is only 2 days travel from Prythian, okay? Which is somehow a big deal. Point blank, this is potentially a life-threatening situation. But Feyre calms herself down because even if this is indeed what she thinks it is, her ass family is starving, so she's still gotta hunt something. And secondly, she actually came prepared with the one thing that can kill a fairy, and that is ash. So she gets out her mountain ash arrow. And although she's still not 100% sure if this is a fairy or just a jacked up wolf, she decides she doesn't give a fuck. Quote, "And if it was indeed a fairy's heart pounding under all that fur, then good riddance. Good riddance after all their kind had done to us. I wouldn't risk this one later creeping into our village to slaughter and maim and torment. Let him die here and now. I'll be glad to end him." So what exactly did fairies do to humans? A lot, but we're getting there. But at this point, this wolf starts just munching down on this deer right in front of her. And so she's like, oh hell no. I was gonna make a pair of boots out of that and also eat it with a side of potatoes. And so, ba-boom. 5 booms.
Sorry to hear about your brother that passed away. He gets 5 big booms. Boom! Boom!
She shoots her arrow into the wolf's neck and it starts bleeding all over the snow. And as this is happening, the wolf looks at her as if it's freakishly self-aware. So she fires a second arrow directly into its eye. He looked with a sort of awareness and surprise that made me fire the second arrow, just in case that intelligence was of the immortal, wicked sort. So she's like, fairies, but is simultaneously in denial that this definitely is one, if that makes sense. And so she goes on to do the craziest shit ever, and that is literally skinning this wolf in the middle of this snow. Like, I'm imagining this looks like that snow door from Monsters Inc. with the abominable snowman. Yeah, she's cutting this thing's skin off, and she gathers his pelt and pieces of his meat, and also grabs the dead deer by its legs and begins dragging it through the forest and back to her family. This is insane on all levels. First of all, whether or not you think fairies are good or bad, they're still a sentient being that has been alive for hundreds and hundreds of more years than humans. So it's actually crazy. It's actually really crazy to be like, I killed this sentient thing. I'm taking its skin off. Okay, I know we do that to animals, but this is like a kind of like a human thing. And whether or not you think it's ethical to do this, because there's a lot of reasons why fairies and mortals don't like each other, which we'll get into in a second, wouldn't it still be gross to eat him, given the fact that his default form is indeed pretty much human? Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. This is also shocking, nor does it really make sense for her to be able to carry all this, simply because of how her appearance is described. Here's how she's written, okay? She's described as being extremely skinny, extremely gangly, and pale, with golden brown hair, and slightly tilted up blue-gray eyes. I just hate that. I just fucking hate that last part. Can I say that? I don't even read fantasy books like that. Like, it is very rare that I will pick one up off the shelf. But even I know this is some type of trope. It's like, oh, she's rugged, but she's decrepit, and she's also beautiful somehow, and oh, her cheekbones are perfect and she's starving. Like, I don't know what it is. You can comment down below if you understand what I'm talking about. Maybe I'm fucking insane, I don't know, but the bottom line is that she is skinny as hell, and then she's over here lifting a deer. How much does a deer weigh? A female deer weighs an average of 80 to 120 pounds. Then a wolf pelt alone is between 10 to 15 pounds, and that's not even considering the weight of the other freaking meat that she's gathered here. I don't know, I'm nitpicking. Anyways, as soon as she gets home through this perilous journey, her sisters immediately start bitching at her, and specifically Nesta is like, ew, you smell like shit. Ew, who farted? You guys, I wish I was joking, but this is literally how rude they are. Nesta crinkled her nose with a sniff. She picked at my clothes. You stink like a pig covered in its own filth. Can't you at least try to pretend that you're not an ignorant peasant? Feyre is so much better than me, because that night, I don't know what I would do. I'm not a violent person, but I want her to get pranked. I want the whipped cream thing in the hand, hit him in the face. I am tired of this bitch. Moving on though, the next day they all go to their local market and they try to sell the wolf hide. But it's here that we learn about some religious, pilgrim ass looking preachers called the Children of the Blessed, because they're walking down the street preaching against people's will. They're kind of like those guys that hold the signs up on the sidewalk that says the rapture's coming, or like, ew, you're gay, like stuff like that, except with fairy lore. Because basically, the Children of the Blessed think that fairies are cool and that the high fae are the mortals' overlords. And this is controversial as hell to say for a variety of reasons. Like, remember when Feyre said, "Good riddance for all their kind has done to us"? Well, we get a little bit of a lore dump here about that. So apparently, the high fae used to rule over humans before the war. What war, you may be asking? It's literally just called the war, which seems like a massive oversight as like a writer, because this war is actually really important and critical to the relationship between fairies and humans. Like, I hate to say it, but it just comes off as lazy. Like, you're telling me we have high fae living in Prithian, shapeshifting and doing magic, but you forgot to name the war? I looked this up too. They don't call it anything else in any other book. Like, she doubled down on this just being the war. Whatever though. Anyways, in ancient times, fairies and humans used to live together, but because there was a crazy power imbalance between them, the fairies began treating humans as their slaves. And at this point in the story, we don't know much else about what went on during that time, but we do know that this treatment resulted in catastrophe, and that the high fae had to sign a treaty to formally agree that they wouldn't take humans as slaves anymore or kill them, at least not outside of their territory. Now, what is the name of this very important treaty? Get this, it's called the treaty. Yeah, I couldn't believe it, and this is actually a recurring theme in this book, that there's certain things that just straight up get ignored from a creative standpoint, which is a shame because there's tons of things in here that are very interesting. Like, even the Children of the Blessed thing is pretty cool. But this just feels like when I was 4 years old and I named my favorite stuffed animal Piggy because he was a pig. But all of this stuff went down 500 years ago, okay? And immediately after they signed the treaty, they built the wall. Yes, Pink Floyd. This wall is a magical barrier that separates the mortal lands from Prithian, which is invisible, but fairies can feel its presence. By the way, I know I'm complaining about the same thing 3 times in a row, but the wall is just called the wall too. Like, just know that. But the wall basically allowed fairies to keep the northern parts of the world. Meanwhile, humans were left with the southern territories. And an additional fun little piece of lore is that there's this thing called the Book of Breathings, which is a magical book that was quite literally sliced in half, and one side was given to the fairies and the other the mortals. And this was purely symbolic, since no one can wield this book for evil. In fact, it's written in a language so old that no one would ever even know how to read it. And the origins of this thing are supposedly from something called the Cauldron. From what I understand, is a legend of where everything came from. It's kind of like the Big Bang Theory of ACOTAR. Anyways, though, there is animosity in these streets for the Children of the Blessed. Like, townsfolk are just like yelling at them, calling them fairy-loving whores. To which Feyre thinks to herself, I can't disagree. Oh my god. Then Nesta chimes in, yelling at these people, saying, don't you idiots understand what those monsters did to us for all those centuries? What they still do for sport when they can get away with it? You deserve the end you'll meet at fairies' hands. Fools and whores. All of you. And I do have to say, they are kind of giving like Scientologist recruitment group. Like, they're honestly insane. I mean, telling people to worship who own them as slaves, like they're slave slave owners. Are you kidding me? But like, y'all need to not even entertain these people anymore. They're just like brain rot before brain rot. But anyways, Feyre goes up to this mercenary that's selling things at the market, which, by the way, I didn't know this. A mercenary is a bounty hunter. This lady is basically like a Mandalorian, except without the benefits of having a little green thing in a robe. Good news though, okay? She wants to buy Feyre's hide, and they're in the middle of exchanging coins when the mercenary warns of an ominous attack on humans from fairies. She needs to take herself and tells her she needs to take herself and her family far, far away from this village. Quote, a word of advice from one hunter to another. Don't go far into the woods. I wouldn't even get close to where you were yesterday. A wolf this size would be the least of your problems. More and more, I've been hearing stories about those things slipping through the wall. Feyre says, are they going to attack? And in response, the mercenary says, no one knows what the Fae are planning. We don't know if the High Lord's leash on these beasts are slipping, or if these are targeted attacks. I guarded for an old nobleman who claimed it had been getting worse these past 50 years. He got on a boat south 2 weeks ago and told me I should leave if I was smart. Before he sailed off, he admitted that he'd had word from one of his friends that in the dead of night, a pack of Martax crossed the wall and tore half of his village apart. A Martax is another type of fairy that apparently has the body of a bear, the head of a lion, and the teeth of a shark. But I shit you not, the mercenary says, they're more mean than all three of them combined. Yes, shredding human beings to shreds is pretty mean. After this, Feyre thanks the mercenary, and she does seem concerned for her family's safety, but then quickly gets distracted by this dude hanging around outside named Isaac. And Isaac really isn't important at all, but he's basically Feyre's no strings attached booty call. And she describes their relationship as being strictly feral and just for a carnal desire for sex. And although she does describe being with him as less lonely, there's truly no romance or love to be had. All they do have is sex in a decrepit barn. Yes, you heard that right, ladies and gentlemen. This is a decrepit barn boy. I will say though, apparently he's good enough at what he does that Feyre is contemplating how she's gonna ask him to have sex with her even after he gets married. Like, damn, these mortals really don't take marriage seriously. And she's horny as hell. You know, something that is noteworthy about, you know, romance books is that I notice that the women are always the least experienced person on the earth. Like, they're either like a virgin or they have had sex with like one person. And then when they meet the love interest, they're like, oh my god, he's the coolest guy on the earth. Yeah, no wonder he's the coolest guy on the earth. You knew like one person before this. You're 19. Anyways though, this chapter ends with all of them heading back to their cottage, which for some reason I can't help but imagine as Shrek's house in my mind's eye. Whatever, the three irritable sisters go to sleep, right? They go Mimi's, okay? Then chapter 4 happens. Listen up, because it gets crazy. The scene literally begins with Feyre holding a knife as a giant ass wolf fairy breaks into their house saying some obscene shit. He's like, murderers, murderers, who killed him? Yes, that's exactly what he sounded like. And of course, as you've probably guessed, he is talking about the wolf that Feyre killed yesterday. But all of them are scared shitless. Like, Nesta is shaking, Elaine is crying, Feyre's dad is standing up trying to protect them, ready to hop to her, even though he knows he could be pushed over with the slightest breeze. See, this guy's actually a pretty good dad, alright? Fuck you, Nesta. Meanwhile, Feyre is already getting prepared, okay? She's getting her mountain ash arrow out as this fairy is continuously howling howling at them to spill the beans on who killed that damn wolf. And after a hot minute of even more chaos, Feyre is like, I did. I don't know why she has a southern accent now. But obviously, this is not going to help the situation. Like, doubling down on what you have done in front of a big ass fairy that probably, maybe, as far as you know, wants to rip you to shreds, maybe not a great idea. In fact, she probably says the worst thing possible next. She says she didn't know it was a fairy, but even if she did, she would have done the same thing to get even with them for all their kind have done to humans. And you know, as Tati Westbrook famously said, time and place? Like, are you trying to get everyone killed? But this obviously pisses off this fairy wolf even more, because apparently the wolf that she skinned was his friend. And given the fact that this was a humanoid sentient creature that actually made no attempt to hurt her, he says she murdered him in cold blood. But Feyre's like, no, listen, I don't give a fuck. She's like, too bad, too long, didn't read, but congratulations, or I'm so sorry. And just when you think this guy's about to kill them all, he breaks out ye old treaty. And he claims that the consequences for a human killing a fairy is a life for a life. And because of this constitutional rule, he gives her two options. Number one, die. Number two, come live with me in my castle. Let's live large, baby. But Feyre hears this and feels like this is gonna be slavery. Obviously, there's a history here, so it's not looking hot. And so she goes, I'd rather die than be your slave. Just kill me now. And again, we get it, because who the fuck is this guy? Plus, are you guys not like historically colonizers? But just know, and this is a spoiler alert a little bit, he is, in fact, just legitimately forcing her to move to Prythian. But now Feyre's biggest dilemma is going with him to Prythian, because she sees this as breaking her promise to her mom about taking care of her family. But I just have to say it, you know, this is dumb, because it's a life or death scenario here. And these three dingleberries, they're all gonna die if you don't leave. Like, something tells me your mom will understand. But in any case, she finally agrees to go. So the fairy tells her to grab her things and breaks her ash arrow. And then in a moment that is actually quite sad, as she's leaving, her father grabs her and tells her to never come back because she's too good for them. Quote, if you ever escape, ever convince them that you've paid your debt, don't return. Don't ever come back. You go somewhere new and you make a name for yourself. You were always too good for here, Feyre. Too good for us, too good for everyone. And so, Feyre and the fairy head off to Prythian on horseback. And at this point, Feyre is wondering how she's gonna be a slave when ye old treaty literally says that fairies cannot have slaves. But she assumes it's because she killed one of them. Like, Feyre, you gotta have your rights read. You gotta get the whole damn scroll out, because we don't know your rights here. Where is like the mortal police? Like, we just take the word of this fucking guy. But as this ride continues, Feyre tries to plot how she's going to kill him. Again, understandable. But then this fairy guy knocks her unconscious using magic, okay? This is called the glamour. I personally do not like that. I don't like that name, but that is what he did. Anyways, in what feels like the blink of an eye, she wakes up in Prythian, already across the border. And she says, quote, had I been held that long in an enchanted sleep? Bastard. And don't forget, Prythian is a 2-day ride away. She slept for 2 whole days, which honestly sounds marvelous as hell. I need this to happen to me before I get on a plane. Bad. Now, the reason behind giving her the glamour is because presumably they don't want her to know the path to leave. life. And also, what scary shit, like what scary creatures she should know about before trying or, attempting to leave underneath this wall. But point blank, you need to know this. Prithian freaking rocks. This place fucks. The weather is perfect. It's got beautiful spring hills, lush gardens, forests, big old lakes, and waterfalls. It's basically Sweden. There's definitely worse places to be abducted. Example, Vegas. Example, Florida. Now that would really be a punishment. But yeah, so Farah arrives at this wolf's estate, which is described by Farah as so beautiful, to paint it would be useless and would never do it justice. Fun fact, Farah is a painter. She's just never had time to do it because her sisters are always up her ass about something, and that's on capitalism. But Farah enters this manor and she's like, whoa, you're rich. You have forks and knives. Holy shit. And in my mind, the reason behind this is that they've been eating soup like at medieval times. Like, when they give you that industrial sized tub of soup and it's hot as hell and they're like, yeah, you're supposed to just like drink that like it's a soda. That's what the Archeron family has been doing, so this is pretty insane. Anyways, we learn that this fairy who stole her is named Tamlin. Boo, boo, boo. I don't like this guy, okay? There's a lot to freaking talk about with him. I'm just saying it outright. Like, first introduction. Wait. But my opinion, okay? What's important here is that he's basically a giant, hairy, fucked up beast. And by that, I mean jacked up, like in the gym. I'm talking lean beef patty. And if it wasn't already obvious, he is high fae, and his default form is a little blonde himbo with elf ears. Speaking of elf ears, I keep trying to put these on and just like boop, boop. These things do not want to stay on me. But he goes on to explain a little bit about the lore of this place. So this manor is located in the Spring Court, and the Spring Court is one of the 7 courts that are split in Prithian. And we don't really know what any of these other courts, territories look like at this point. But like I said, this has got to be one of the best ones. Like, one of these is literally called the Night Court, and there's got to be some freaky shit going on over there. Tamlin also goes over the rules of this situation, and he tells Farah that he's not her jailer and that she can leave whenever she wants. Asterisk, as long as she remains in Prithian, which again, as far as we know, this is all because it's in the treaty. But despite this kind of neutral captivity happening here, Farah describes him as beautiful and merciless, which is kind of interesting. Look, I'm not trying to defend him. I do not like him. We'll get into that later. But he did literally spare her life after having skinned and eaten his friend. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of gracious. Anyways though, Farah is led into a huge, beautiful room where there is a banquet of food on the table, and Tamlin keeps insinuating for her to eat. But even though she's starving, she refuses because for some reason, all mortals are taught as children to never eat a fairy's food or you become their slave. But something you have to understand about Farah is that she's kind of like speciesist. Like, she generalizes all sorts of stereotypes about fairies as like evil, disgusting beasts who eat babies. Like, they live in dens and they hibernate during the winter like sandy cheeks. All of which aren't true, but regardless, she's been brainwashed to believe these things. The present day beef is definitely a bit nuanced. Anyways, this is when we meet Lucien. And Lucien is this hairy ass conniving dude who loves being a sarcastic sarcastic prick. And so he walks in through the door, and at first he doesn't even notice Feyre there. And he casually asks Tamlin if he found the person who killed Andros, whomst we learn is the fairy that Feyre murdered. And as soon as he says this, Tamlin points right over to Feyre at the table, which makes Lucien start snarling and growling, just crashing out onto Feyre, wanting revenge of the Sith. Did you enjoy killing my friend, human? Did you hesitate? Or was the hatred in your heart riding you too hard to consider sparing him? It must have been so satisfying for a small mortal thing like you to take him down. He even briefly suggests to Tamlin that they should kill her, but he's like, no, calm down. He goes, Lucien, my captor said quietly, the name echoing with a hint of a snarl. Behave. Then, suddenly, he snaps to her, and he starts complimenting her. My apologies, lady. I'm Lucien, courtier of Emissary. Your eyes are like stars, and your hair like burnished gold. Going from I kill you to I like your hair is honestly kinda camp. I can't hate on it. Tamlin then says, as for the girl, she stays unharmed. End of discussion. Her life in that hovel was hell enough. Hovel? Like, damn, this is like if someone else rolls up into your neighborhood unprompted and is like, this place is a dump. You live like this? Like, shut up. But we are then introduced to Alice, who is a servant of Tamlin's, and he tells her to go show her the room that she'll be sleeping in, her bed, and basically to help Feyre freshen up. You know, like take a bath, get some nice clothes on. And this girl gets treated like she's like a star poodle in a dog show, like preparing to show off her paws. Because like they're bathing her, cutting her hair, dressing her, combing that hair, giving her a full-on glow up. Kind of insane considering she brutally murdered Tamlin's friend. But it's worth mentioning that Feyre doesn't really want this. In fact, Alice tries to give her like a nice white gown, and she just starts begging for her old clothes back. I hadn't worn a dress in years. I wasn't about to start. Not when escape was my main priority. I wouldn't be able to move freely in my gown. And this apparently causes Alice to storm out like you hurt her feelings on day one. But you gotta be kidding me. None of these servants can find a pair of pants for this girl. But although Feyre is still plotting her escape, she's kind of starting to think, damn, these people are not anything like what I imagined. And it's so strange considering I am in a room that is literally bigger than my family's entire cottage. She also feels some sort of guilt because here she is in this room worth like $1 bajillion. Meanwhile, you know, her family's venison is probably running out, which I do 100% get. But at the same time, Nesta needs to get up off her ass, man. Get up on your ass and work. Seems like nobody wants to work these days. Kim Kardashian. But anyways, Feyre is returned to the dining room where Lucien and Tamlin are drinking from golden goblets. And I'm not gonna lie, here's where the book kinda starts going downhill for me, because both of these dudes are low-key kinda creeping on her. And let me remind you that she is 19 years old, and both of these dudes are immortal, meaning that they have lived hundreds of years. So Tamlin says, before you ask again, the food is safe for you to eat. He pointed at the chair at the end of the table. No sign of his claws. When I didn't move, he sighed sharply. What do you want then? I said nothing. She thinks to herself, to flee, to save my family. Lucien drawled from his seat along the length of the table. I told you so, Tamlin. He flicked a glance toward his friend. Your skills with females have definitely become rusty in recent decades. First of all, the fact that even in this mythological fantasy realm, we still have dudes calling women females is crazy. The female situation is crazy. He glowered at Lucien, shifting in his seat. I tried not to stiffen at the other information Lucien had given away. Decades. Tamlin didn't look much older than me, but his kind was immortal. He could be hundreds of years old, thousands. My mouth dried up as I carefully studied their strange, masked faces. Unearthly, primal, and imperious, like immovable gods or feral courtiers. Ugh, I forgot about this mask thing. Okay, I gotta explain why these dudes are wearing masks. Give me a minute. Then, Lucien said, his remaining rusted eye fixed on me. Lucien only has one eye. Oh my god, I forgot to mention that. But he says, you don't look half as bad now. A relief, I suppose, since you're to live with us, though the tunic isn't as pretty as a dress. Like, dude, why the hell do you care what she's wearing? This is practically a tiny little fetal child to you. But I also kind of think that Lucien is just like an asshole who inserts himself where he shan't. And this, of course, won't be the only time that the two of them are creepy or kind of like mentioning her looks, like, oh, look at you. I mean, I'm sure you've already realized this by now. Tamlin is the love interest of this book. Yes, ma'am, this Beauty and the Beast ass book. But besides the fact that I think it's kind of creepy, there's also the cringe factor, right? Because if both of these fools are supposed to be immortal beings, why do they act and talk like red-pilled 16-year-olds at times? Every time I kind of get into a fictitious age gap, people actually climb all the way up my buttocks. And if you'd love to see some examples of that, I recommend watching my age gaps video specifically. But it's simply, I don't care. I'm gonna be that guy really quick. I don't understand the choice of age 19. Like, truly, it kind of seems like the only reason why she's not 18 is because people would be like, what the hell, that's too young. But you know, Sarah kind of gets around this by giving her that one extra year, because people are so strange about this sort of thing. People truly believe that a 19-year-old is not a teenager, but it is. I'm sorry to break it to everyone. That's why teen is in the name, okay? Everyone in their late 20s knows this. And if you think about it too hard, that there's this guy who's like 500 years old with the maturity of someone who's lived that long versus this pipsqueak who knows nothing about anything, it's a little bit uncomfortable, okay? But it's totally worth it to mention that Sarah J. Maas did not invent this trope, of course. Like, there's a ton of beloved media with this issue, and two that come to mind right away are Twilight and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which are clinically actually way worse because both of the girls in those are actually underage. But that's the last I'm gonna mention this age gap because we have a lot to get through, and let's be real, if we keep hyper fixating on that, we are not gonna have a good time. But anyways, the following day, Feyre asks Tamlin again if she's supposed to be his slave, to which Tamlin replies, I don't keep slaves. And since they're having this conversation, she takes the opportunity to bring up her family. She says she can't stay here forever and that her family is starving and they really need her, to which Tamlin informs her that he has taken care of her family and that he wouldn't take away the sole provider of a home without replacing it. And this is just a pinky promise that her family is safe. There's not like proof of this or anything. However, allegedly, there's a rumor going around, Tamlin said it himself, fairies can't lie. Is that the truth or is that ironically a lie? Stay tuned to find out. But you know, despite doing all these somewhat charitable things for Feyre, he reiterates that she is not permitted to cross the wall. And if she does, she will not only face consequences, but her family will no longer be protected. Essentially, if she were to try to leave over the wall, her chances of being bounty hunted by fairies would skyrocket. But besides this, Tamlin spills some very important tea about Prythian. I mentioned earlier that Tamlin and Lucien are both wearing masks. But this is not just them. This is all fairies. And they wear these masks to protect themselves against something called the Blight, which is a disease that has been spreading across the land for 15 years. And it forces fairies to wear masks in their human-like form. And it's said that the Blight might eventually infect not only fairies, but the mortal realm and humanity. And it turns out that Tamlin was actually the one who sent out Andros, the fairy that Feyre killed, into the mortal realm to try to find a cure for the Blight before it's too late. Now, is the Blight confusing? Yes. Are there a lot of weird rules to the Blight? Yes, siree. One of them being that you can be in beast form without the mask, just not in your human form. You gotta have that shit on. And you know, I was blighting it up, I was studying the Blight, and I realized, you know what? It's okay if this doesn't make sense. I'm sure there's gonna be some people in the comments that are like, Nikki, what do you mean? This is so easy to understand. No, it's not. The Blight forces them to wear a mask to protect themselves from the Blight because the Blight is making their magic wear off, but the Blight is also going to infect humans. For why? Don't know. There's a ton of details revealed about this later, but I'm in the overall opinion that the Blight is kind of just like kind of dumb. I don't like this aspect of the book. I don't like it when there's just overly convenient rules applied to things. Like, oh, he has to wear the mask in human form, oh, but not in the beast form. Like, what? But you know, my grievances aside, we move into chapter 8. In chapter 8, Feyre hatches this bizarre plan to escape. She's like, I'm gonna get in Lucien's good graces, and he's gonna like me so much that he'll do me a favor and convince Tamlin to change the treaty so that she could go home. First of all, like, I don't think that's how that works. I would think a treaty that was made 500 years ago is pretty set in stone with the rules, but what do I know, okay? But the second crazy thing about that is that Lucien fucking hates her, and for good reason. He literally was like, did you have fun killing my friend? Okay? Meanwhile, Tamlin is actually being really chill, so I would think the exact opposite would be what he would want to attempt. Like, why not get closer to Tamlin? He'll just let you free himself. But while she's roaming around the property looking for Lucien, she bumps into Tamlin for like the 500th time that day. And he tries to not only offer her a ride around the residence so she can like see around, he also wants to hang out. But she rejects him hard as hell. And this actually pisses Tamlin off. Like, he kind of reacts like an incel. Tamlin clenched his hands into fists, as if fighting against the claws itching to burst out. But he didn't reprimand me, didn't do anything other than prowl back into the house without another word. And besides, you know, the hostage situation taking place, the main reason she's going ham on rejecting him is that she needs to be with Lucien alone. They can't be bumping into Lucien together. No, no, no. She's gotta get him to like her on her own accord. So Feyre finds Lucien in the forest on horseback, and she's like, hey dude, what are you doing? And he's like, hey, I'm on patrol. And this next part honestly made me laugh. She goes, why are you on patrol? I thought you were Tamlin's emissary, which, by the way, means someone who goes on missions for a representative. I googled that right now and I'm very proud of it. But in response to this, Lucien says that it used to be Andros's shift. Ouch. She's over here like, hey, what are you doing? I didn't know this was your job. He's like, yeah, it was the job of the person that you killed, dumbass. But Feyre apologizes to him, and she actually seems to mean it this time, saying, quote, I didn't realize how much he meant to you. And for the first time, it appears that she is truly coming to terms with what she did. Lucien doesn't really give a hot damn though. He just shrugs it off. But despite her genuine apology, Lucien sees right through through Feyre's plans, and out of nowhere says, "So when are you going to start trying to persuade me to beseech Tamlin to find a way to free you from the treaty's rules?" This absolutely gags Feyre. He says, quote, "That's why you agreed to come out here, isn't it? Why you wound up at the stables exactly as I was leaving?" He shot me a sideways glance with the russet eye of his. "Honestly, I'm impressed and flattered that you'd think I have that kind of sway with Tamlin." And Feyre's like, what are you talking about? But he just cuts her off. He says, "Before you waste your precious few human breaths, let me explain to you two things. One, if I had it my way, you'd be gone. So it wouldn't take much convincing on your part. I can't have my way because there is no alternative to what the treaty demands. There's no extra loophole." Which is exactly what the fuck I thought. This is like pulling up to court and being like, "Can you change something in the Constitution for me? Your Honor, it's just not fair and I'd like to change it." Anyways though, Feyre takes this opportunity to ask him questions about the blight. She asks, what happened to the magic to make it act that way? Regarding the masks, of course. Lucian replies, "Something was sent from the shitholes of hell." He then glanced around and swore, "I shouldn't have said that. If word got back to her," Feyre says, "Who?" "The color leached from his sun-kissed skin. He dragged a hand through his hair." "Never mind. The less you know, the better." And Feyre takes note of this because it is very strange that Lucian is scared of this mysterious her that he doesn't even want to name. Feyre also asks if there's any type of fairy that would be willing to answer her questions about the treaty and somehow be able to free her from those rules. And this is the first time that we hear about the Suriel, a bit of a recurring creature throughout the book. Lucian says the Suriel are old and wicked and not worth the danger of going out to find them. And if you're stupid enough to keep looking so intrigued, I'm going to become rather suspicious and tell Tam to put you under house arrest. Though I suppose you would deserve it if you were indeed stupid enough to seek one out. And just as we learn about one spooky creature, they immediately run into a different one. Suddenly, Lucian starts whispering in a frantic way. And he's like, "Don't react, no matter how you feel or what you see. Do not look. Just stare ahead." And this is when she hears a voice in her head that says, "I will grind your bones between my claws. I will drink your marrow. I will feast on your flesh. I am what you dread. Look at me." And it just keeps going on. This thing's like, "Look at me, look at me, look at me." And come to find out, this thing is called the Bog. Now, the boogie is actually a subspecies of a lesser fairy, and no one really knows what the hell this thing does all day. It's kind of like the monster version of an unemployed friend on a Tuesday. Seriously, everyone is like, "We don't know why this thing comes around. I think he's bored as hell." Now, the tea on the boogie is that it can't harm you unless you look at it, because if you do, it becomes real, if that makes sense. Which is giving Weeping Angels from Doctor Who just a little bit. Where my Who heads at? British One Piece? Anyone? In terms of appearance though, I feel like the Bog looks like the Dredge from Dead by Daylight. Just kind of like a big old fart cloud. And that's kind of this thing's pitfall, is that it's just gross. But its real strength lies in the fact that it is incredibly talented at trying to convince you to look at it. So much so that it just devours people left and right. And it feeds on his victims like medieval torture style, like it is slow. Ferris says, quote, "I heard its voice in my head. It told me to look." Lucian rolled his shoulders. "Thank the cauldron that you didn't. Cleaning up that mess would have ruined the rest of my day." He gave a wan smile. "I didn't return it." Oh yeah, that's another thing. Characters are constantly saying, "by the cauldron," or "thank the cauldron." What in the cauldron? But nobody's like, what is the cauldron? And at first, I thought this was like their literal god or something. but apparently it is a powerful, magical, sentient artifact that created and creates life. It is said that it holds everyone's fates. So it's just like a thing. It's like a whimsical kitchen pot. But anyways, Lucian says that no one knows why or how the bog has gotten to hang out around these parts of town, you know, in Prithian. And what sucks even more about this is that there's no way to kill them. No further explanation, by the way. But on the flip side, in a nice turn of events, it seems like the bog brought Lucian and Feyre together. Or at least a little bit. They got in a little trauma bonding together, and that'll do the trick. For example, here's some funny banter. So you're old, I said, and you carry around a sword and go on border control. Did you fight in the war? He winced. Shit, Feyre, I'm not that old. Which, by the way, where is the word shit coming from? This is so crazy. They're always like, by the cauldron this, by the cauldron that, by the fate of the freaking bottle beazle booms, okay? They're just saying shit, whimsical things, and then here comes the word shit. I'm sorry, I just wasn't expecting that. Are you a warrior though? Lucian huffed a laugh. Not as good as Tam, but I know how to handle my weapons. He patted the hilt of his sword. Would you like me to teach you how to wield a blade? Or do you already know how? Oh, mighty mortal huntress. If you took down Andros, you probably don't need to learn anything. Only where to aim, right? I don't know how to use a sword. I only know how to hunt. Same thing, isn't it? For me, it's different. Lucian fell silent, considering. I suppose you humans are such hateful cowards that you would have had to wet yourself, curled up, if you'd known beyond a doubt what Andros Tolly was. Lucian sighed as he looked me over. Do you ever stop being so serious and dull? Do you ever stop being such a prick? Lucian grinned at me. Much better. I will say though, I wish that there was something seriously huge that would have happened between them for them to connect a little bit more, because right now this is getting, you know, to an unserious level. Of course there is some kind of resentment towards her, but he's already kind of like, LOL, you're a killer. This is so silly, you know? I just feel like it should take a lot more for somebody to want to be around you after what she did. But back at the manor, Tamlin finds out that they went on a hunt together. And keep in mind, this is after Feyre had rejected him and told him that she just wanted to be alone, which makes him PO'd. Lucian says, we went on a hunt. I heard, Tamlin said roughly, glancing between us as we took our seats. And did you have fun? Slowly, his claw sank back into his flesh. Lucian didn't answer, leaving it to me. Did you catch anything? No. Lucian gave me a pointed cough, as if urging me to say more. Lucian quietly says, oh my god. See, this is what the fuck I'm talking about. I'm starting to like him a lot. But Tamlin looked up, more animal than Fae in those green eyes. A demand for whatever it was Lucian was about to say. Lucian's throat bobbed. The bog was in the forest today. And after he says this, Tamlin loses his shit. Like, he immediately begins puffing his chest and like flexing his moves. His furry claws even pop out, and he snaps an industrial strength fork in half. Like, at this point, he could even destroy a marine grade polymer chair. That one's for all my Hoover heads. But he proceeds to run out the door and go on a wild bog chase, looking around for it. And Feyre's like, wait, I thought you said no one can kill it. To which Lucian says, Tamlin is the only one who can fight it. Which, again, no explanation. This bothers me so much. But maybe I should give ACOTAR the benefit of the doubt and assume that this will be explained later in the series. I think my main complaint, regardless though, is that there's no pushback on that answer. Feyre's not like, wait, what? How? She's just kind of like, okay. And in her mind, she's just thinking, how could such a powerful beast have ever been so kind to me? Offer me a bed and food, a marine grade polymer chair. I don't know, it's just some Stockholm syndrome kind of sprinkled on top, which I think I mentioned before that this is like heavily based on Beauty and the Beast, which is just all Stockholm syndrome. Like, whoops, 100% Stockholm. So it makes sense. But Tamlin was definitely definitely trying to impress Feyre with this. He's like one of those guys that goes to like an alpha male boot camp so his wife can like stop resenting him for his inability to grocery shop. He's like, I gotta go out of my way to do this thing that is completely unnecessary. But I'll say this, unfortunately and sadly, this works on Feyre because she stays up all night waiting for him. She's super anxious about this already, but the anxiety intensifies as she looks outside and sees something in the bushes that looks like her father. Da da da. My father had come to take me, to save me. Maybe he had a ship prepared to take us far, far away. Maybe he had somehow sold the cottage and gotten enough money to set us up in a new place, a new continent. My father, my crippled, broken father had come. I don't know. I don't know if I can say that. Like, I feel like that's like really bad to say, but you know what? It's medieval times, kind of, and we're saying shit, like literally the word shit. So I guess it's like prison rules right now. And fully believing that this apparition is her dad, quickly slides down her window and into the courtyard. But right before she's about to run towards him, Tamlin snatches her up and is like, going somewhere? And she pleads with him to let her go because she's worried about her father. But Tamlin looks up where she saw him and tells her to look again. So she looks up and he suddenly morphs into her sister. And before it can morph again, Tamlin lets out a big ol' howl to the moon that scares whatever this creature is away. And it turns out this thing is called a cloaca. Oh, I mean a puka. And basically, they use your deepest desires to lure you out to like a remote private location, and then they get you. They eat you slowly, just like the bog. They eat you up and they love it. It's just like a Friday night at Cane's. Oh yes, Tamlin says these dumbasses like the bog and the puka never used to set foot in the spring court. In fact, they were contained into their own little designated areas to be freaky. But now that the sickness has swept over Prithian, created by the Blythe, TM, it has weakened the wards that kept them out. And for obvious reasons, Tamlin is upset about this, telling Feyre that he already warned her that her senses would betray her. He says, "Fool, if you're ever going to run away, at least do it in the daytime." He stared down at me, and the fangs slowly retracted. The claws remained. Put those things away. There are worse things than the bog prowling these woods at night. That thing at the gates isn't one of them, and it still would have taken a good long while devouring you. And might I add, Feyre can literally leave whenever she wants. Like, the door is unlocked. Tamlin is like, yeah, you can leave if you want. So the fact that she keeps even trying to like slip away at night is kind of funny. Like, bro, I'm leaving in the crisp morning for this. I want to see those beautiful Sweden views. And I understand this time it was because of her dad, but there's a lot of other instances of this, like her just ignoring that, yeah, she could leave. Albeit it's gonna be hard, but the sneaking is not necessary. Feyre tells Tamlin about the promise she made to her mother to protect her family and that she really does need to go home. Tamlin reiterates again that they've been taken care of and more. As in, they're not just living comfy, they're living luxuriously. And this makes Feyre finally kind of trust him about that, because she also remembers that since he's a fairy, he can't lie. And technically, this means she's relieved of her promise to her mother, and she can live as freely as she'd like. And listen, I still get 100% trying to leave. Like, she was fully freaking abducted. However, I selfishly would stay my ass right here. In fact, I think I would find a way to contact my family and tell them that they need to send in some like fairy death threats just so that they could get punished and also come here. Like, send them the address of this manor and have them mail in whatever the like medieval concept of furry porn plan would be. Skipping ahead to chapter 13, firstly, I have to mention that Feyre is thinking about learning how to read in this chapter, something that she unfortunately never learned how to do. Before our downfall, my mother had sorely neglected our education, not bothering to hire a governess, and after poverty struck and my elder sisters, who could read and write, deemed the village school beneath us, they didn't bother to teach me. I could read enough to function and enough to form some letters, but so poorly that even signing my name was mortifying. And she's really embarrassed to ask anyone for help. She figures that if she asks Tamlin or Lucian, that they're just gonna be like, "You foolish mortal." So she just vows to teach herself, putting some good use to her newly found free time. Now, this reading issue becomes really important, especially after she fights a worm WWE wrestler style. It's up to you to guess whether or not I'm joking about that. Anyways though, this is where things really start turning around for me and Lucian even more. Like, I fully became a Lucian fan in this chapter. I came out of the Lucian closet because he and Feyre's dynamic is actually pretty wholesome. And you know how he mentioned the cereals earlier? Also very hard for me to say, by the way. I keep saying cereal. But Feyre was asking about them because they have the ability to grant you the answer to any 3 questions. And they have to answer truthfully. The issue with that, though, is that you have to trap one to make them fess up. And so when she runs into Lucian in the kitchen, she's like, "Hey man, about those cereals, do you know hypothetically how I would go about finding one and catching one?" And surprisingly, he's very helpful. And their whole convo is quite charming. He starts out by saying that there's been a disturbance in the forest and that he has to go check it out because it's one of those unwanted, nasty creatures raising hell. And Feyre is actually really surprised that Lucian even gave her that much information on what he's doing. She's kind of used to being stonewalled by these guys at this point. You know, earlier he was like, the mysterious she, if she finds out, you know, so they're hiding shit from her. And she goes, "I'm impressed you answered me that much," I said as casually as I could, thinking through my words. "But it's too bad you're not like the cereal, spouting any information I want if I'm clever enough to snare you." For a moment he blinked at me, then his mouth twisted to the side and that metal eye whizzed and narrowed on me. "I suppose you won't tell me what you want to know. You have your secrets and I have mine," I said carefully. "But if you were a cereal," I added with deliberate slowness, "how exactly would I trap you?" Lucian set down the knife and picked at his nails. For a moment I wondered if he would tell me anything at all, wondered if he would go right to Tamlin and tattle. But then he said, "I'd probably have a weakness for groves of young birch trees in the western woods and freshly slaughtered chickens, and would probably be so greedy that I wouldn't notice the double loop snare rigged above the grove to pin my legs in place." I didn't dare ask why he decided to be accommodating. There was still a good chance he wouldn't mind seeing me dead, but I wouldn't risk it. "I somehow prefer you as High Fae." He smirked. "If I was insane and stupid enough to go after a cereal, I'd also take a bow and quiver, and maybe a knife just like this one." He sheathed the knife that he cleaned and set it down on the edge of the table, an offering. "And I'd be prepared to run like hell when I freed it, to the nearest running water, which they hate crossing. But you're not insane, so you'll be here, right? Safe and sound? Because I'll be conveniently hunting on the grounds, and with my superior hearing, I might be feeling generous enough to listen if someone screams from the western woods. But it's a good thing I had no role in telling you to go out today, since Tam would eviscerate anyone who told you how to trap a cereal. And it's a really good thing I had planned to hunt anyway. lie. Because if anyone caught me helping you, there would be trouble of a whole other hell awaiting us. I hope your secrets are worth it. Then Feyre says, it's a good thing that while you have superior hearing, I possess superior abilities to keep my mouth shut. He snorted as I took the knife from the table and turned to procure the bow from my room. I think I'm starting to like you. For a murdering human, that is. Very mischievous these two are. I really like it. And so, Feyre prepares to head to the western woods and follows his instructions. But mentally prepare to visualize. Because I just read that appearance-wise, they have long limbs, a ghostly aura, and wear bald caps. I mean, I lied about that last part, but just think about it anyways. So she sets up these snares in the forest, right? And she's really scared that the surreal is going to detect her before it even has the chance to get clamped up in one of these things. But surely enough, there was a snap, a whoosh, and a hollowed out wicked scream that made my bones and muscles and breath lock up. Another enraged shriek pierced the forest, and my snares groaned as they held and held and held. I climbed out of the tree and went to go meet the surreal. Da 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 dun da da dun dun. Oh shit, here we go, Baldy. So she goes up to this thing as if she has like an appointment with it, and she's like, hey, and it says human. Its voice was at once one and many, old and young, beautiful and grotesque. And here's where we get a iconic line in the Sarah J. Maas universe, apparently. Apparently, this is a recurring theme, okay? This is her marine grade polymer chair here. She says, my bowels turned watery. This is like internalized diarrhea. I do not understand this. You really could have said anything else. Like my stomach clenched. I felt like I was gonna throw up. Like anything but like this diarrhea-centric narrative, and I can't wait to find out where else she has written this. But she goes ahead and asks her 3 questions. Number 1, is there a way for me to truly go home? The serial's answer is no, unless you want you and your family to die. Question 2, what do you know about Tamlin? Although Feyre previously thought that Tamlin was high fae, it turns out that Tamlin is actually a high lord of the Spring Court, which means that he practically rules over the entire Spring Court section of Prythian. This is surprising because a high lord is like 10,000 times more powerful than a standard high fae. But her 3rd question is, what can be done about the blight that has spread throughout Prythian, and where did it come from? To which the Surreal does not directly answer her question, but tells her that there is an ancient evil in the lands stemming from an island, Highburn. And he goes on to explain that this whole island is ruled by a cruel king, hates humans, and wishes that he never signed the treaty to give up his human slaves. So basically, in an effort to enslave humans again, he's sent out creatures and lesser fairies to infect the lands of Prythian. And once again, he brings up the mysterious attack that is coming. You know, the one that the mercenary mentioned earlier at the farmer's market. He basically says that this attack threatens all of the mortal lands and every single one of the humans. And it seems as though he has more to say, but right as he's about to explain things further, she hears the screams of the Naga, which causes even the Surreal to start freaking out. And the dude is pretty much like, okay, let me out now. This is getting serious, please. But before Feyre can even react, the Naga comes and surrounds her. And these guys are pretty stoked, to say the least. Reason being, they basically got 2 birds with 1 stone. They got Feyre for the entree and a Surreal for the main course. The Dark Mother has sent us a gift today, brothers. Gazing at the Surreal, who was clawing at the snare now, the Naga's amber eyes shifted toward me again. And a meal. So they're like, damn, dinner and a show, woo! But Feyre's stumbling, okay? She's backing away from them and threatening them with her world-famous bow. Meanwhile, they're bringing out their forks and knives laughing because she's really not shit to them. And the Suriel, who's still in the trap, is like, ayo, is anyone gonna free me? And Feyre kind of feels bad for the thing because I mean, she got him into the situation. So she sacrifices an arrow for him. And instead of first and foremost protecting herself, she fires it at the rope, ensnaring him. And this guy, oh, and he doesn't waste a second, this piece of shit. He immediately flies the fuck away and crosses an entire river. Like, damn, he doesn't even care if he has to cross the river at this point. He's just out. And this makes the Naga even more mad. They're like, damn, we lost the Suriel. We're gonna eat you even more now. But just as they're about to kill her, in a flash, Tamlin shows up out of nowhere and freaking tossles them around. Like the Naga are flying off and screaming, and this MF just wipes them all out. And Feyre is just like, damn, that really is a high lord. He's on X Games mode. But of course Tamlin is like, what the F, man? Why are you here? Feyre just like stonewalls him. She does not want to say anything. She's just like, thank you, come again. And the situation in her mind is making her appreciate Tamlin more. And on their way back, she's like, damn, I just know Lucien is gonna get his freaking ass kicked. Now, there really is so much left in store. Craziness, such bizarre things, cringe things, funny things, like the whole enchilada. And I really wanted to make this into one video, but the book is just so long and it is very lore heavy, probably particularly since it's the first one and every idea needs to be introduced. So I'm gonna cut it off right here. I have to tap out because quite frankly, it is 8:31 p.m. right now. I have to post by 10. Y'all don't even understand the predicament that I'm in. Oh my god, but I wish I could cram more into this video. I really do. Hopefully you did enjoy it though, and I really hope that you want a part 2 so that we can finish going over this Unhinged ACOTAR deep dive. I know I've really been enjoying it despite my many complaints, and oh boy, are there more, especially with the ending of this book. Oh my god, if you know, you know. Thank you so much for watching, and with that I have to give a big thanks to my patrons. So starting with the base nerd tier, Levi Rogers, Ainsley, Arceli Laura, Ava W, Babby Linney, Bioket, Casey H, Christine, Dimmy, Dom Sod, Emise, Grandin, Grand Peepus, Kat K, Lauren, Mallory, Manny Morelia, Marie File, Nug, Polar Bear, Pop Smats, Rachel Stanley, Reno Rabbit, Ronan, Ruby Femme, Sienna Akira, Shay, Sophia, Stacy, Steph P, Supernova, Tacky, WYWY, and Zayla Bobela. Now moving on to the cool nerd tier, we have Brooke, Drew, Emily, Haley P, Joaquin Altore, Kenny Kinning, Kirby, Marley, May, Rat, Roy Salgado, Twihard336, and Zugi E. Thank you guys so freaking much. I appreciate you. I hope you have a good rest of your night, and I will see you all very soon.